We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets.
I have the body of a weak and feeble woman.
All men are created equal. Because I have a dream.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Hello everybody and welcome to this next episode of ModsPod. Today is quite a sensitive topic, a serious topic. So we're going to look at the impact of the death camps on the Jewish community and after the war. So just for a bit of backstory, that the confusion sometimes arises with the labour camps during the 1930s. And then obviously we talk about Auschwitz a lot, being the factory, if you like, of death that was designed to go into commission after 1942, when the Nazis decided that they were going to exterminate all of the Jews. It was called the final solution. So the labour camps a little bit earlier on were still pretty brutal, but they weren't designated factories of death where people were sent to die, whereas Auschwitz was. So we have with us today Harry and Shai. All right, so over to you guys.
So when they first arrived, it sort of looked like a train station to just try and keep the Jews and everyone else relaxed. They played music just to not make the situation any worse than it was, that they thought it was.
So it would have been like chaos if they thought this was something not good.
Yeah.
So they were told in the ghettos before they left that they were going to a new life, so to get all the best equipment, pots, pans, clothes, they were going to be this new life out of the horrible ghettos of Germany and around Europe. So when they arrived, it actually looked like, a train station. So a little bit less stressful and a bit less panicky, maybe.
Yeah. And then when they left, they got sorted into the male, female, and then younger, and then other people. And then what happened was they asked them who was tired and just anyone that wasn't able to do work. And then they said that they were sent for a shower, which was really gas chambers, and then the other people that were sent to work, they died because of hard labor, starvation and dehydration.
Okay, so you mentioned that the men and the younger lads were generally sent to the one side of the selection process because they were, I guess, fit and healthy, because that journey could have been anything up to 8-9 hours depending on where in Europe they were coming from. So when they opened the cattle carts, the big brown sort of look like trains, if someone was obviously tired, as you would be, or poorly or injured, they would be sent to the other row and told they were going to go for a shower. So that keeps them all in line, I guess, doesn't it? Keeps them less panicking, and they will march down towards the showers, probably feeling quite good, actually, being inside the train for 8-9 hours, maybe even a couple of days. And obviously, as you say, that it was never a shower, it was gas chamber, and the shower heads weren't actually connected to any water.
Yeah.
So the first bit of deception there, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think it was just all manipulation, just saying that they were going to go to a new life and then they have showers and stuff, and really they were just never going to survive it, were they? And that's just the bit for me, that's just the most hard to think about, that they thought that they were going to go into something new and away from the ghettos when they were just going to be killed.
Yeah, and that to me is one of the hardest bits about learning about this and teaching about this too, is the idea, this really sort of sick manipulation, as you say, it's a good word. So they were told to put their clothes on a hook and remember the number that their clothes were on, because once they've had the shower, they'll need to go and get their stuff. And they were told, be quick though, because the food's going cold, you've had a long journey. These people didn't have a clue. And I suppose, in a way, is that a good thing that they didn't know? That they thought they were going for a shower? What would have happened had they known what was about to happen? I suppose this is quite, as I say, sensitive topic today, but that's a thought to think about, isn't it?
All right, so basically, they were transported from individual countries. A lot, for 426,000 from Hungary, 300,000 from Poland, and 69,000 from France, 60 from the Netherlands, 55,000 from Greece, 25,000 from Belgium, 10,000 from former Yugoslavia, 7,000 from Italy, and 6,900 from Norway. That was like a lot of people.
Absolutely. And they all went to Auschwitz.
Yeah. And like these aren't like just bad. These are really innocent people, never done anything wrong. They've just been transported to Auschwitz for no reason whatsoever. And between April and early July 1944, 440,000 Jews were deported from Hungary, of whom 426,000 were transported to Auschwitz. The SS sent 320,000 of them directly to the gas chambers in Auschwitz-Birkenau, while 110 were sent to forced labour. Within 3 weeks of their arrival at Auschwitz, the SS transferred many Hungarian Jews and concentration camps in Germany and Austria.
Okay, so the majority, obviously, of the numbers that we talk about, 6 million Jews in total killed during the Holocaust, other minority groups as well. So Romani travellers, Slavic people, so people from Eastern Europe, they were generally sent there too, gay people, disabled people, so physically or mentally disabled. So a whole host of people from society were sent to this place in order, because the Nazis believed that they were a drain on society and they need to be removed in the creation of this perfect Aryan race, all right, which we'll learn a little bit more about in year 9, and then in year 11 a bit more detail again. So having discussed the horrors of Auschwitz, I think we can leave that there for now, especially now as we are still quite young on this. So we want to talk a little bit more about the effects of the Holocaust on the Jewish culture. So off you go.
So in that time of World War II, Yiddish was spoken amongst 99% of all Jewish people. So even after the Holocaust happened, people were scared to speak Yiddish in case people would recognize them. Because in my Jewish community, there's a really old woman, I'm not going to say her name, but she completely forgot how to speak Yiddish, because she knew how to speak it when she was young, but then after that, she just got told that she shouldn't speak it because in like fear that they were going to get recognized, because back then you didn't really know who was in favor and who wasn't.
Okay, so the term Yiddish or Yid is a negative, isn't it? People use that term as a slur now. I hear it sometimes at Tottenham Hotspur football stadium and things. So the culture, even as you're talking about the impact afterwards, people still use this term in a negative way. All right.
But I also want to talk about how there was a survey released on Holocaust Remembrance Day a couple of years ago about people our age, a bit older than that.
So that's 12-ish. 12
to like millennials to Gen Z people. And they did this survey about just about the Holocaust and asking questions. And what I was really, shocked about is how 66% of them didn't know what Auschwitz was. And then they did the same survey in Slavic countries, Eastern European, and I think it was 48% of them couldn't name a single concentration camp that ever existed.
Wow. So that's partly my job, isn't it, as a history teacher, and a bit of a duty as well, to make sure that we just keep teaching this and talking about this so it never goes away. That is quite worrying though, isn't it, as statistics, definitely. So on a slightly side note for now, we are starting to think about how we use the terminology around this topic, and obviously we use the Holocaust. It's generally widely accepted as the term, but what's your thoughts on the term Holocaust or the Shoah? Or is it Shoah?
Shoah.
The Shoah.
I prefer saying the Shoah because it just feels more natural to me to say it. I don't really say the Holocaust apart from in school.
Well, Holocaust means sacrifice, and no one must sacrifice this. They didn't have a choice, did they? When you say the word sacrifice, it's almost like you've made this choice, haven't you, to sacrifice something, whereas the literal meaning of the Shoah is,
Yeah, the Shoah means catastrophic, which I think is way more appropriate to use.
Yeah, catastrophe, absolutely. Harry?
Because word sacrifice means they've died for a reason, but this was no reason. They've died because someone didn't like them, and
Murdered.
it's just discrimination.
Yeah, they died. They were murdered, weren't they? They didn't just die.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so we are making efforts to use the word Shoah in school, especially from the Holocaust Education Trust. They've asked us to do that as well. So you've obviously talked about this at home with Mum, and so what's Mum's thoughts? What's Mum's thinking?
Mum said that the Holocaust has affected her in many ways, but she says that the biggest way is probably trusting people, because you don't really know what people think inside their households about Jewish people and the Holocaust. So she's told me multiple times that you have to wait before you know someone fully to tell them that you're Jewish or tell them that you have an interest in the Holocaust. So
Okay, so because they think they might react negatively?
yeah.
All right, which would suggest, wouldn't it, that anti-Semitism is still strong. So when you guys do tell people, what's generally the reaction? Positive or?
They don't really like, some people, they give you that look like, oh, I have to be careful around you now, for some reason.
Well, that's quite controversial, isn't it? What, in case they like offend you or something?
Yeah.
So last week in school, you brought in your, was it?
My talit.
Your talit for your bar mitzvah. And everyone seemed interested in that
Yeah.
around. So that's a good thing, isn't it? People
Yeah.
were quite interested in what it was. So you think we've got a bit of work to do still?
I think so. I think we do.
So we don't hear, obviously, hopefully, we don't hear things like people saying, it didn't happen or you deserved it or any of that stuff. That would be like beyond. Is that what Mum's worried about?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. And has she witnessed that over her life? Or has she not said?
She's not said.
Yeah, I'd like to think that she wouldn't. And I'd like to think as you grow up, you might get the odd person who says things. But that's just ignorance, really, isn't it? But we've got to challenge it. And that's partly what we do. Why this is a good podcast, because we're educating. And that's why we do it in school so much, that hopefully that doesn't happen. All right. I think it's quite a monumental human tragedy, isn't it? That needs to make us think. So obviously it doesn't ever happen again. Okay, so that's interesting, and I understand why Mum maybe thinks like that, and it makes me a bit sad, really, that that's the feeling. But hopefully, like I say, that's not the reality. So what about that's yours at home? What about in school? What have you learned in your 11, 12 years of life so far in school?
So in primary school we were taught it, but it was very like minimum because obviously we were children and stuff like that. But they kind of sugarcoated it because they did make it seem good, but they didn't make it seem as bad as it was.
All right. So you want to try and get the reality of the horror of it, but you feel like obviously they toned it down a little bit because of your age.
Yeah.
Do you think it would have been better to see a bit more at that young age, or might it have upset or traumatized people?
I think so, because you can go like to traumatize people, and then there's a bit below that. Like you need that bit below it because you don't
to make you actually get it.
Yeah.
All right, and you think that maybe that wasn't quite done in primary school so much?
Definitely.
All right, so is that the only... So when you come to secondary school, every one of you have had at least an introduction to World War II and life in Nazi Germany?
No, my primary school didn't.
So you didn't in your primary school? No. Not at all? Did you do World War II?
No.
Okay, that's interesting. Do you think it's something that should be done then in primary school?
Yeah, I think so. Not to the extent that you will learn in older years, but...
Mm-hmm. So obviously we've had a little talk, haven't we, about the conditions before the war or the 1930s. So things like Jewish people had separate benches to sit on. They couldn't go to the swimming baths. Eventually they had to wear the Star of David on their clothes so everyone knew who the Jews were. They lost their citizenship. They weren't allowed to get married to a German. So basically their whole lives had been turned upside down in the 1930s. And that was bad enough, wasn't it? And then we get to the Holocaust or the Shoah from 1942 onwards, where we end up in Auschwitz. All right, so we definitely do it in secondary school. There's a national curriculum, we have to do it, and that's right. I think what I'm hearing is we probably need to make sure that every young person has that, just to try and avoid, hopefully, some ignorance, really, isn't it? In that they think they know about Hitler because of games or films or whatever they've heard, but if they're not being taught properly, and Harry, you think it should be a little bit less, I think, sugar-coated. I see what you're saying by that. You're not saying it sounds good, but they're holding back a bit. Do you think people would care more and be a bit more understanding and thoughtful if they knew the reality?
And again with games, they make it seem like it was just like someone in shot all the Germans, but that's not how it was. Like wars aren't like that.
And that's the thing with history, isn't it? We've got a big responsibility being history teachers and learning history to try and move us away from the idea that it is all a game or a movie. And I take that very seriously in what we do in our curriculum here to make sure that we get the truth, the reality, and also an understanding. We're not always here to sort of judge the other side or the enemy, if you like, but it's about education, isn't it? And trying to understand what was happening. And in this case, it's absolutely to make sure it never happens again. So recently, there's been quite a big global disaster in the Hamas attacks. October the 7th, that'll be sort of known as forever now, you know, at 9/11 on October the 7th. Do you think that that's had a bit of a negative impact, particularly thinking about what Mum's mentioned, anti-Semitic? So we've seen a lot of marches through London, haven't we? What do you think?
Well, I have first-hand experience. I was in Peterborough a couple of weeks ago, and I was walking, and then there was a massive Palestinian march, and I had to put my Star of David away really quickly because I just felt frightened about what would happen, because it's just scary walking into a massive group of people knowing that they really do not like you, and they will do anything to make sure that you don't feel good being whoever you are.
And I don't think any of us really around this table can understand what that feels like. Only you. We know, don't we, since October 7th that some Jewish schools in London had to close because the children weren't safe. And that's crazy, isn't it? So this rise of anti-Semitism, certainly as this is going on, but then equally there's a huge wave the other way, isn't there? Sort of pro-Israel and the attacks, and it's very difficult. And that's again where we come back to this idea about education. Clearly people will have views based on their own religion or experiences, but I think my job is to be balanced in the sense that we need to understand everything before we make judgments, because the last thing we want is ignorance, because ignorance is generally what leads to the hate, and ironically it was ignorance that started this. I've always said that the Holocaust didn't start in Auschwitz. It started with ignorance 20 years earlier, 30 years earlier, in fact, all throughout time.
Probably when he was born, like, there's got to be something.
Well, it's just generally, there's always been anti-Semitism or any sort of homophobia or anything like that. It breeds anger and evil in people, doesn't it?
We're going to go to the pro-Israel march on Sunday in London, but we thought it wasn't going to be safe enough to go.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So you were going to go to a pro-Israel march to obviously show your support, but you were worried that it would be dangerous. Okay. And as it was, it turned out fine. It wasn't, but I can understand why you might think that. So the fact that you put your necklace away because you felt uncomfortable in your country is worrying, isn't it? But let's hope it ends as soon as possible, really, because it's tragic, absolutely tragic. Well, that's an interesting insight, and it's quite sad. But this whole podcast is a serious one, isn't it? So to sort of bring that element to it highlights why we probably need to do this, don't we? It's all about education, absolutely. So a lot of times, I guess, the problem here is that people are getting their information from the wrong places, like YouTube or whatever. Harry, what do you think?
Yeah, because like on YouTube, there'll be these YouTubers who are pro-Israel, and then there's the pro-Palestine, and they will obviously, like, not giving the negative view, but like the children are too young really to understand what is going on. So when they go around saying, I'm pro-Palestine, like, they're not really understanding what's going on.
And that's dangerous, isn't it? So so these people, random people, are making YouTube videos about something they don't really probably know anything about, and then you guys, if you're subscribers or whatever, you might be getting the wrong information. That's quite scary, isn't it? Okay, that's really interesting, that, Harry. YouTube is dangerous. I always think the internet's dangerous, absolutely. Shai, your brother?
My brother, he is the chairman of the Jewish Society in Loughborough, and he is there to make sure that there's no anti-Semitism and to make sure that everyone's safe.
The fact that, like, a university needs people to be, like, needs someone to make sure everyone's safe is really worrying, because, like, there shouldn't be reason to protect people. They should already feel safe. And if that's going on in a school, like, what's going on in, like, countries, like, such as Palestine, where obviously they're being taught that that Jewish people aren't, like, the same level because of the war that's going on right now.
Do you think they're being taught that, or do you think that's kind of what they're just seeing, that they think that all people from Israel are bad, so they just naturally will grow to that? Or do you think people are telling them that in their schools and things?
People are definitely probably telling them that. I feel like because of the war, it's sort of like making people think that's an excuse to be like anti-Semitic, maybe.
Okay, so it's a really controversial one that we've said it now, so we'll keep talking about it. I don't know, so I don't want to say for a fact or even challenge what you've just said, that people in Palestine are being taught, presumably in schools, you mean, but that Israel are the enemy, and Israel are bad and things. Perhaps that kind of thing might be being taught in some households who are, maybe they support Hamas or whatever. And the problem is that we've got with this whole thing, isn't it, is both the brutality is crazy, but we've got to remember that Hamas is different to Palestine.
Yeah.
Hamas is a terrorist group in Palestine. So the education system, I'd imagine, maybe not, but certainly within homes. And of course, now the problem is that these people who are anti-Semitic or who are in some way against Jewish people, they will say to their children, see, look, look, look. But on the flip side, and we'll be saying in Israel, look what these Palestinians have done to us. And actually, perhaps if we keep doing this to both sides, is this ever going to end? And it's about education, isn't it? Which is entirely what this ModsPod episode is about. As long as we keep saying to each other, they're the baddies, they're the baddies, they're the baddies, it's going to keep going backwards and forwards, isn't it? And this is essentially, I think, what we could argue happened in Germany in the 1930s, is although people would have obviously had these views anyway, because they seemed to be allowed to be heard and said, more people sort of got onto it. And then eventually what happened is even like moderate, decent people, in the end, they started thinking this was normal. So really, this is the starting point, isn't it, of education, which is why it's important that we know the facts. But we also need to try and create a world here, don't we, where we are not unkind. So talking about this education, or where people are getting this information from, we mentioned it earlier, but there's websites and things.
Yeah. I was like doing not really an experiment, but I just wanted to see what kind of stuff was like you could access on the school computers, and it kind of shocked me because you can find loads of pro-Israel stuff and like apps like that, which is good, but you can also find pro-Palestine stuff, and it's sort of like it's not as bad that they're pro-Palestine because obviously if people come from that country, it's okay, but it's just lies on there.
All right, so it's difficult to know what the truth is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I was there for that. I sit next to Harry English. I was there doing the experiment with him. So we first searched up pro-Israel websites. We found them. None were blocked, which was okay, I guess. Then we searched Free Palestine websites, and we went on 3 of them.
Yeah.
And all of them were like saying like lies, well, not lies, but saying that well, exaggerating.
So I think that's the problem with the internet, full stop, isn't it? Is anyone can make a website and anyone can put that website how they want to do. Is it controversial to say that they shouldn't be blocked, so that if people wanted to do their own research, they could find out both sides, or should both sides be blocked, or what? What do you think?
I think maybe to an extent, like lies, sites that have mostly lies should be blocked. But I mean, if it has facts on there and if it is an opinion, it says it's an opinion, then yeah, that is fine.
So this is quite a good point anyway for the internet. You guys live in this internet world, don't you, where everything is like, we probably need to go to websites that we think we can trust, don't we? And generally there's like, international news websites like CNN, I don't know, BBC, whatever, Channel 4 News, whatever, proper things, rather than just like, some guy called Ben in his bedroom has made a website about, what he thinks about Palestine. But the fact is that you're saying that it's a bit concerning that all of this stuff was just easily there to be accessed, which could make people get the wrong idea, which then raises this hate and stuff.
We also looked on the shops on there, and they had like maps of Israel, and they just crossed out Israel and put Palestine, which if an Israeli person was to see that it would probably really offend them.
Mm-hmm. So we've got to remember as well, haven't we, that the problem in Palestine is Hamas.
Yeah.
All right. So they're the terrorists. They're the ones doing this stuff. But it seems that then what you're saying is a bit of a muddying of the water here. in people changing maps and things like that, because Palestine would say that it was always their land, Israel would say it was always their land, and this has been the problem since they were given this land was split, way back a couple of decades ago. So what is the solution to this Hamas situation, do you think?
End the war.
End the war. So what is the solution? How do you please both sides? Does it start with education? What I'm trying to say, does it start with stopping people hating and saying and spreading?
Definitely.
Well, it doesn't matter what you say in schools. At home will always be a different opinion.
Yeah, so we've got to change hearts and minds.
Yeah.
Because I have this thing, I've always said it, that babies don't hate each other, children don't hate each other, but then all of a sudden, as they get older, based on their influences, and you're saying from homes, definitely, they then form these opinions, don't they? And then that becomes their view of society. And then some people just say these things, but actually, if two babies are born in the same hospital at the same time and they're like friends till they're 2 or 3, they don't know any of these things, do they? You could have one of one colour, one of another colour, but then the influences. So we need to try and change the narrative of what's happening. But the problem is passions are high, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I think this is going to need the whole world working together on this one, aren't they? To just try and change things. All right. So thank you guys for this episode. It's been a bit of a challenging one, hasn't it? Because it's so emotional and emotive. And hopefully we've managed to raise some interesting points and get people thinking about the situation. It's a bit upsetting that you feel that you have been a victim in lots of ways, and the community in England with schools, all the things we've talked about. And we just hope that stops, doesn't it, as well. All right. So thank you everyone for listening to this one. Any ideas or thoughts, let us know, and we'll see you soon for another episode.